Hey, hello.
Hey.
We were already looking at it.
Didn't see you there. Well, we don't know the timing of it. We'll see you back later.
Good morning, Vietnam. Hey, good morning. Good afternoon, Redemption. I hope you're doing well. Today is Theology and Culture Thursdays. Again, if it's your first time joining in, we take a couple times a week during this COVID season to just spend some time with you midweek and some live streams. And we try and pick a different cultural or theological topic to get a little more serious on Thursdays. And so today's title, as you see there, is Language, Cussing, and the Tongue.
But especially cussing.
With emphasis. Anthony's really excited to talk about cussing today, and you'll see why. Let's start off with a question, if we could. What's your favorite cuss word?
I don't know any cuss words.
Yeah, the hope is this. We want to go through some scriptures.
Yeah.
Let's see what the Bible says. We'll do some commentary on it, personal experience, and then maybe some practical stuff even in the midst of it. So,
fun story. My mom came to me a couple years ago. This might get people to stop listening right away. And she said, man, you know, one thing I'm glad of how we raise you kids, none of you guys cuss. You've never cussed. You guys are never cussers.
Your mom said that?
Yeah, and I was like, totally, I've never cussed in my life, Mom.
What did your sister say?
It was just me and her.
Bridget probably hasn't.
I don't think Bridget probably.
Yeah,
I don't think
Bridget
she
never
has.
has.
Luke has. Rosemary has.
I know. Luke. So anyway.
Sorry, called out siblings. I didn't mean to air that dirty laundry, but love you guys.
I think this one has the potential to be really a lot of interaction and dialogue. If there's questions, follow-ups, comments on just, hey, I think that's right or that's wrong, or you should say, you shouldn't say.
My friend Jeff McCarroll, good to see you, buddy.
J Mac, what's up, buddy? So I think it's important. We love to hear kind of feedback and thoughts as we go along. So let's look at some scriptures. We'll kind of start there and work our way through.
We're gonna go through two sets of scriptures here. It's
Right.
a lot of verses, which is can be daunting, but it's worth it. We want to kind of look at a whole of scripture in regards, especially to cussing first. This idea of cussing. So first, if you were going to go to a handful of scriptures to tell you don't cuss, do not cuss, these are the heavy hitters, as I've entitled them on our notes here. I'm just going to read through them quickly. Colossians 3:8 says this, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Ephesians 4:29 says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Ephesians 5:4 says, nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. I'm just messing with it. I was just trying to make it break. Proverbs 4:24, keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Matthew 5:22, but I say to you that everyone who's angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. In Matthew 15:10-11, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen and understand, what goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them. So those are some of the heavy hitters. We also didn't know Angie Poesiak's on here. Angie, good to see you.
Angie is on here. Hey, Angie, how are you?
Yeah, there's a few others too. So that's those verses alone. Those are the verses my mama would use or my dad would use to.
Yeah, and honestly, they're 6 of 50.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
a ton
more. Yeah, there's more. Right. Those are the heavy hitters.
There's a lot of them.
But having grown up in the church, I've personally noticed as I read my Bible, there are some seeming contradictions here.
Right. As a kid, you call them loopholes.
Loopholes is exactly what I would call them. Right. They would be called Bible cussing loopholes, in my opinion. Right. So just to warn you guys, some of the things we're going to talk about here are a little bit PG-13, even to, I would say, R-rated or higher. But we're going to be referencing scripture so that...
that's on the authors.
Yes, we're not doing this just to be silly. We really are trying to have a full conversation with this. So, that being said, let's get into some seeming contradictions here. First, in Philippians 3:8, you guys know the verse. It's pretty famous. Paul says this, "Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith." Mm-hmm. Vince, what do you know about that word rubbish? I know some things. What do you know about that word rubbish that would make you go, huh?
Yeah. Can we say, I don't know.
Don't say the actual word, but just what do you know about it?
Yeah, I mean, when Paul's using, when employing that term, it's a weighted term, right? And it would have been understood as with the equivalent of shit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it is excrement. It is very.
It was like a cuss word, probably.
Oh yeah.
From what we know, we might be off, but it was not a nice word at the very least.
It wasn't going to be used at the Queen's table. Let's say that,
the
right?
Queen's table,
So no, I mean, it'd be likened to the S word, for lack of a better way to say. I mean, so it really is pressing towards excrement, feet, like all that is in view there, but in a derogatory way.
Yeah. So Paul is using very charged language. Interesting. Yeah. Galatians 5. Church, stay with me before you denounce me as a heretic. Galatians 5:11 and 12 says this, "But if I, brothers, still preach circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. I wish those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves."
Why are you reading it like this?
Because I'm a little excited about this topic. It's a fun topic.
It is.
It's a fun topic.
Yeah.
Here's why.
This is like, I could see you as a little boy growing up in the G
Thank
household.
you.
Like, one day.
This is why I got in trouble. Why this is fun for me is because if we'll get into this more in the conversation. Cussing is like when I grew up was like the magic words you don't say. Like this is like some of the worst sins you can commit is cussing. Yeah. So then when I started to study scripture and see some things that seem like cusses to me or vulgar language, I got confused. I was like, what's going on here? Right. So Paul says essentially to this group of guys that are saying you need to be circumcised in order to be a Christian. He goes, you know what? They can keep teaching that. Let them keep teaching that. But I hope they chop that stuff off. Right. Like castrate themselves. Like some of the, based on what commentaries you read, stronger or less strong language is being used there.
Yeah, it's the same. It's similar to the Philippians language. Yeah. Like it just like culturally, this was really intense. Like again, you're not using this in proper circles.
Yeah. So all right, okay, guys. This one's the worst verse. This is the worst verse I'm going to read. If you grow up in the church, you know this verse, especially if you're an immature male, as I am. To warn you guys, there's some legitimately intense language here where God is speaking to Israel and describing what Israel's relationship with him has been like. So in Ezekiel 23, 19 and 20, it says this. And the reason it's translated this way is because this is how strong the language is. You might even, as I read it, go like, I don't like those words. But these are the equivalent words that are being translated in Hebrew. So that it's not just some crazy interpreter was like, well, I'm going to use that word. Like they're trying to translate this accurately. Right. Says this is a warning. Get your kids off this if they're on. I'm serious. It says this, yet she increased her whoring. Remember the days of her youth when she played the whore in the land of Egypt. God is talking about Israel. Ezekiel is talking about Israel. And lusted after her lovers there, whose members were like those of donkeys, and whose issue was like that of horses. Yeah. I don't know if I need to say more. That seems to those two verses alone seem to contradict all the first verses we've read. I'm not trying to make you guys have a moment where you go, what is going on? There's contradictions in the Bible, but I'm just trying to set up a fuller conversation. Yeah. All right, there's that. The next verse is a little more tame, but Isaiah 64:6, we have all become like one who is unclean. All of our righteous deeds are like a polluted garment. What do you know about that polluted garment? How much have you studied that? What do you know about that word?
Yeah. So I mean, they had different words for clean, unclean throughout the Old Testament. Some were meant to denote more severe terms. So this what we're dealing here is not just this isn't like a ceremonial unclean type deal. If this was a intentional, this is the term there is like the lowest form of unclean. Yeah. And so talking about that, it's is nasty. Very harsh, disgusting, dirty language.
Yeah. I've heard a mixture of things it could have been. These rags that they're talking about. I've heard excrement is one of them. I've heard other things as well. Yep. So, anyways, and then so those are a bunch of verses, and then if you just go to the book of the Song of Solomon, and if we were ancient Hebrews reading the Song of Solomon, they often didn't let people read it till they were 13 because of the explicit nature of the book. And so if we could read it with those ears and eyes and know what all these metaphors mean, and we do know what some of them mean for sure, we'd realize there is some explicit descriptions of love.
Yeah. It's a Danielle Steele novel. Anyway, it's like
that's what a throwback reference.
I don't know any modern day.
Who did 50 Shades of Grey? It's not that, but
it's not 50 Shades.
But Danielle Steele would be
good.
I
mean, but like that type
in the 90s, if you were at Safeway, there was a book aisle with
it is sexually explicit language, right? That's being thrown out there. Yeah.
Totally. So there is all sorts of things in the Bible that have these, what I would say is vulgar language and some of these kind of obscenity and all this. So Vince, help us understand, like that's confusing when you got all these verses that are like, don't do that. Right. And then you've got these authors employing that language at times. And and I think even I think it's all God's word. Yep. So God is having them employ this language in these different ways. And so how do you wrestle with that? And then maybe just how do you define what is a cuss then? Like what is obscene language? What is foolish talk? How would you talk through that? Jeff appreciated the Danielle Steele reference, which that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a great question, and even if you were to go to and if you're part of Redemption, I do this often. I love to go to like Webster's or to the dictionary and be like, hey, what is our culture? Because it's just trying to get down. What does our culture think this word means, right? And so a cuss word, right? It's a swear word, and you kind of work your way through. Eventually, you're gonna boil it down to profanity. It's profane language, and then you look at the definition of profanity, and it is, if you look at the definition, it says socially irresponsible and socially, culturally offensive language, right? And so immediately there is this thrust into the conversation of there is a social backing and a cultural backing that is a necessary part of defining what a cuss word is, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat some of the words I've heard, but in China, for instance, words for that or this is a word we would never say in our culture and time. And I think sometimes how I've seen language treated in Christian circles is kind of this, even whenever you say it, however you say it, if you even just make the noises, you're out. That's bad. Like you've committed a grievous sin, which may be what we're seeing here in Scripture is that even it lends itself to maybe having a more nuanced picture there.
And I think it's trying to delve into like a deeper appreciation for culture, for social realities that exist within the greater, larger culture, right? Totally. Because so you grew up in Arcadia, like old Arcadia, you know what I mean? Like,
you don't have to clarify, but I appreciate it.
You know, I grew up in the South, you know, and there's a certain and especially like different parts of the Deep South, different parts of Phoenix. Like there's these little embodied mini cultures, right, that define neighborhoods, that shape people, each family somewhat has its own culture as well. And so it is a difficult thing to truly navigate, well, what is socially responsible in the midst of a very complex cultural system? And so I think that has to come to bear in how we're going to interpret through the scriptures we went through. So when you say these are confusing and seem contradictory, you're not wrong. They do, but it's saying, but I think it's trying to walk that line, because it's not like we invented mini culture. Like, I mean, the cultures of the ancient Near East that Paul's writing to were just as diverse, had just as much various background piling into different places, and so
maybe more so.
Yeah, and probably more so. Yeah. So,
no, that's I think that's helpful to think through. And so what are, when it comes then to cussing and language and these different things?
Yeah.
When you see this throughout Scripture, because I think that you go one or two ways. You go, the first set of verses that I read never say anything bad, never cuss.
Right.
Well, and it's probably good to err on that in some ways, just from even like for your own self. Or you go, what my heart is inclined to, if I'm going to be honest, give me grace, church, is I read these other verses and I'm like, well, Paul did it, so I can too.
Right. That's free license, right?
Yeah.
Like,
so what do you think? What are some things that we as Christians, when we steward our words around cussing specifically, are things to think through? And I'll say some too, but like, what are some things here?
Yeah, I'll start with. I mean, if you zoom in on James chapter 3, a classic text about the tongue and bridling the tongue, and the tongue can like literally shape cultures.
Yeah. James chapter 1 too. I think it says right away, control your tongue.
Control your tongue, right? And so taming the tongue, right? It's the classic black letters that are above in bold. It works through. There's this entire overarching message that goes from James 1 to James 3 that's often speaking of the power of language and of tongue. And so, but he gets into it, and oftentimes what you see is it's often the way he's writing is in the context of fruit. Yeah. And so what happens on the other end of the language? And I think that's super important when we're like, hey, what does it mean for us to kind of think through these verses and what does freedom look like? Is there fruit present, and is it good fruit or bad fruit? Like, is it rotten fruit that's coming out, or is there beneficial fruit that is coming out of that? And so I think that's a massive thing, because I don't want to just reduce it to, and I know we'll probably get there. Is just reduce it to the heart stuff, which is very important. Yeah. But also say, like, if it's just reduced to heart stuff, then maybe it's saying, well, then all of these, like, there's still then this subset of words that can then be bad. But I'm trying to say is potentially there's going to be cultures and societal backgrounds and familial dynamics that are going to exist within a very diverse world where, because of the fruit they might bear, I think are okay to say.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's good to think. So the fruit is always something important for us as Christians to look at. And I think a lot of times.
And let me be very clear, because I don't know who all's watching this necessarily, who will watch this. When Christians talk about fruit, we don't mean literal fruit, and I don't mean to talk down to anyone that may be watching, but in other words, like, what?
That'd be sick, though.
Yeah, no. Like,
I'd be like, everybody would be a Christian, like, you just grow fruit.
A raspberry. That'd be for the really small customers.
That'd be cool.
But so when we say fruit, we literally mean, like, what is the consequence, positive or negative, that comes out? Like, what if you were to say
love,
this,
shalom being increased in the world?
Or decreased, right? So which direction, when this goes forth, the people that hear it, the context, the environment that it's received in, is it edified or is it torn down, right? And I think that's what we mean by fruit, and I think that has to play a pretty big role in it.
No, that's good. I think that's important. I think that's a great. I think what I really appreciate about you always bring up this idea of fruit in ways that I don't bring it up. I feel like I bring it up in order to judge people, and you bring it up to to judge our own hearts. Like, you really, in ways that I haven't thought through it, and you're right. I think that's a way to do this here. I mean, you touched on it a little bit. I'll just touch on this too a little bit too. Is context. Context does determine if a word can be used or not, or if it's obscene or not. Right. Now, I'm certainly sure that there's other factors that play into that, but context is a big part of it.
Yeah.
And so we have fruit so far. I think context is another factor. Like,
Yeah.
you know, my grandmother, you could not say the word fart in front of her. It bothered her a lot. And, you know, I get it. It's kind of a weird word. But so I would try not to say that word around her just because that's what she didn't like, you know? So
right, 'cause the fruit of that would be your grandmother, whom you love, feeling unseen, unloved, uncared for.
Totally. Right? And thinking it's obscene, you know, for her that whatever, it's obscene. So so I think context does really matter, and I think sometimes when it comes to the cussing stuff, we don't think through context. Again, we just treat them kind of like these magical words, like almost like magical curses. Yeah. And really, context probably matters a lot in this conversation, and to think through that. Yeah. That doesn't give us carte blanche. I never say that right. What is it? Carte blanche or blanche?
No, that was right.
Blanche. Yeah. It doesn't give us carte blanche to just say whatever we want, but context affects this conversation. So
massively.
Yeah. Like I honestly, I don't even, if there's a show where characters say like stupid or shut up, I don't let my kids watch it. More because I just don't want that to start getting into their circulation of how they respond to things. Yeah. Not because I think those words are bad words. I'm like, nah, I just don't want that to be their gut level formation process response. You know? Right. So anyway.
I mean, honestly, it's interesting because I think especially now being a parent, thinking through some of the like, well, what words do I want to enter into my kids' vernacular? Totally. You do have to begin to navigate, or at least I've begun to see there are words that I think before I was a parent, I thought I would never want them to say that. Yeah. And I still probably don't. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, that one would be so. But honestly, like, shut up to me has become far more offensive. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
That was a cuss in my house growing up.
Well, there you go. Well, so that's good.
We were allowed to say hush up, though.
Hush up?
With the same anger.
I know.
Hush! I'm just kidding. Sorry, that probably blew out everybody's speakers.
You know, but like, I think that's important, and I think it highlights some of the context pieces that it moves, and it is, in a sense, like it is malleable to the context and the situation and the people that are present. You know, so for a 5 and 2 year old, a 6'3" or 6'2", and you know, young and. You know, like, you're going to navigate this a bit differently. You know?
My 9-month-old cussing all the time.
They won't know. That's what that first word to be. Hush up.
No, that's good. No, I think that's really good. Another thing to think through, and we've already began to touch on it too, because I think there's multiple things to think through when it comes to cussing. I don't think it's just an easy input-output like we want it to be. Is the heart behind it. Yeah. And I think knowing your own heart, and I think sometimes those words come out of a profane heart, not just this, well, no one's around that cares, and there's no bad fruit coming from this. So, but there is something in our heart that is going towards some sort of a profanity or expressing anger in unhealthy ways or whatever it might be. Yeah. That being said, on the flip side of it, I think there's sometimes your heart is not in a bad place. Yeah. You know, you stub a toe in the middle of the woods and a word comes out. I'm not totally sure it's a sin. Right. I'm not willing to say that right away. Right. But, or maybe that just does show where our heart goes to in those moments instead of like,
could be,
Lord Jesus, help my toe, you know, or something like that. Another funny thing to call a family member, they won't care. But my dad, he never cussed. I've never heard him cuss, like real cuss words, I guess. And so, but he would say like, "Oh Lord Jesus, help me with these kids." That was like, he wasn't taking the Lord's name. He would just like pray his
literally pray.
Yeah, so his prayers began to sound like cusses to us. So
you're like, when Dad starts praying, that's when you know.
You go, Lord, help me with these kids. So yeah, I think the heart behind it. Anything to add about the heart behind it?
No. Well, yeah. I mean, I just to reiterate and affirm what you're saying. I think, you know, I think sometimes we make the heart behind it like this confusing thing, and it's not. Like, you know why you're using a word. You know what I mean? Like, we're not. I'd say every once in a while something falls out of your mouth. Totally. But not really. Totally. You know what I mean? Like, we choose our words. And we know why we say what we say.
And to push against some of the things we said already, when the authors are using these words that were, I think, like cusses, or explicit language, sometimes they're using them, but their heart is in the right place, and the context is the right place. A prime example of, I lost my voice when I did the joke.
I know.
Hush up. Some of my childhood stuff came back. So I'm sounding like a wrestler right now, a pro wrestler. But what, like a prime example of somebody's heart's in the right place and the context is right. And I'm not going to get too explicit here, but it's Song of Solomon. Like some of that stuff I would never say outside of that context type of a thing. It's something to think about. That's kind of, it's awkward or weird, but whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's that. The last thing, I don't have it here on notes. One thing I thought about too, and this is a little bit context related, but just thinking through that Romans 14 thing too. There's just, you might feel totally right to say a certain word, even if it's not a cuss, but it just bothers your brother or sister in Christ, or it bothers somebody, not even a brother or sister in Christ, even just somebody that doesn't follow Christ. Yeah. And you're like, I know this word isn't bad, I know, but for whatever reason, society sees it that way, and it's just better to just go, I'm just not going to say this then. Like, I'm just not going to go there. It's not worth it. So...
Yeah, and I think that's an acknowledgement of kind of macro level culture.
Totally.
But with having a background of understanding kind of a micro version of culture, there are realities we live in America, which again, I think you and I have actively, and we just make as a caveat before I say this, don't think America is a Christian nation, but do believe that the Judeo-Christian values that came out of a very much shaped morality here, and also blew it in very significant ways. But that's obviously for a different conversation. But that being said, so that macro level cultural moral value to language still remains in many ways, and so that still exists. I think it's a macro understanding. That's why you're never going to see the president of the United States get up there and. I mean, maybe now.
I'm not making a face. I'm not making a face. What are you saying?
In general,
I'm not making a face.
You know what I mean? Presidents, and our current president, like they're not up there saying cuss words. You know what I mean? Like, and why is that? Because there's a macro level understanding. There are terms that are in our culture that you just don't say in certain spaces. And so I think everyone understands that. But understanding that in the midst of the macro, there exists, again, these smaller cultural pieces, familial units, where I think there is room and leeway.
Totally. No, that's good. Well, okay, Jess, my wife says, my kid hates when I use the word hate, so I'm working on removing it from my vocabulary. That's good. That was actually, in my house growing up, it was also a cuss. You can't say hate. So at least my parents were, they weren't they thought a lot of words were bad, not just the traditional cusses. So, and honestly, I'm glad they taught me some of those things, like hate, shut up, some of those things are there. Because I'm like, shut up. Like, not most people don't really receive it well anyway. So, but touch on the culture, for me to touch on the culture piece a little bit more. I think, there are going to be times, I think sometimes where Christians like, this is a cuss word now? Like, what? Or I can't say this anymore? I used to say this all the time.
Right.
And I think a lot of times Christians have this really, like, they just don't want to change. They're like, this is what I've been saying. Like, and I would say that Scripture probably be like, no, like, you probably should. Like, on the flip side of that, I don't know the scenario, but I'm sure maybe there's ways we contend with our culture in that at some point, someday or whatever. I literally can't think of an example of that where I'd be like, no, we should still be able to say this. But, I imagine there's probably places where even mentioning the cross or Christ in these different ways is seen as blasphemous or profane. And I would say that in those sorts of cultures, you'd be like, well, I'm still going to say these things.
Right.
Let me ask you this. So it just sounded like we basically said, if we check context, heart, Romans 14, the fruit, if all that stuff's good, we're out in the middle of woods and no one's around, we can cuss. Like it sounds like we're saying that a little bit. And maybe we are a little bit. But push against that too, because I'm sure there's people listening that go like, just something feels off about that. That feels wrong. There's a check in my spirit. I'd rather err towards those commands that we read at the beginning than these very specific instances in Scripture where that are seldom too. Like there really are seldom that there are these kind of strong language. So push against it. How would you push against? How would you push against? It sounds like we're saying, go for it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to ask the question of why. I mean, so if you use the example of, if you're, is it still a cuss word if no one can hear it, that type of idea, because then you remove the macro culture out of it, right? Absolutely. So there's no one there to judge it outside of God, right? So does God then have this subjective kind of moral responsibility that he calls us to in the words that we use outside of a cultural, societal context? And I think he does. It's just, is it glorifying unto him? Now, the reality, though, is it's hard to push back against it too hard, because we know the Lord drives internal. Totally. We know Jesus is always going to drive to the heart. He's always going to drive to the internal realities of why. And so I think that's the question I'd say is like, but why? Like, why? So if you see, I can go to the woods and say some cuss words and like, that you experience freedom in that, I think then you shouldn't do it. Like,
that's almost like a weird thing.
Yeah, it's like dude, you've almost created an idol out of a term. Totally. You know what I mean? And so if there's this, if you ask yourself why, and there's this, I can finally go say this, then no, there's other issues you have to deal with. But if you just, I think if we acknowledge language as a gift from God, as a tool given to us by God to mankind, right, that we might be able to communicate with each other the realities of the internal heart and what we're feeling, what we're processing, that we might communicate truth, praise God, that whole deal. Man, I think the litany of the verbal language is available to the adult in the right context with the right heart. So I'll just say this, and this is just being brutally honest with our church, and hopefully this doesn't make some of you leave, but we're lamenting as a leadership team yesterday in just with one another and just talking about our sadness and our hurt and brokenness over the atrocities that are happening in our country, and a couple times like words that would BS, but the real word, got said at least twice. I'm sure the D word.
Who was it? Can you tell me?
We'll tag them in this. But they're like you hear them and you immediately know this is coming from a place of grief and of pain, of lament, a place of I don't have other language to use because we are intentionally trying to communicate the extreme heaviness and weight of what we're actually talking about, So I don't know if I really did too good to push back.
No, I think you did. I think why? Yeah, if you're looking for loopholes, you're probably your heart's in the wrong
that's
place.
Just right.
And I would even push back. You guys can hear the pipes. Our pipes sound like they're exploding right now.
We might not make it out.
Anyway, sorry, I got distracted by that. Yeah, I think that sometimes too, it's like, is your heart reverent before, your place in the universe before God right now, And I think sometimes if my heart goes that direction, it's not, and that's something to think about too.
Yeah.
I was even going back to where you circled back to, of going like, hey, I don't know if in these moments when we're praying it was or wasn't. I had this buddy in high school who seemingly came to the Lord. And I say seemingly because I don't know quite where he's at with his faith today. He always talks as if he's kind of haunted by Jesus still and kind of believes that Jesus is Lord. Jesus. Yeah. And but he was talking through. We would pray at school at lunch or something, and his whole background was tons of cussing and all that kind of stuff. And so in these prayers he'd be cussing throughout the prayer. And he'd be expecting me to correct him, so he kept saying like sorry, and I remember thinking that moment like there's something beautiful, raw, and even like Jeff is saying here, authentic in his prayer. That's like that. I think God even loves seeing his child come to him in this way.
Dude, that's yes, dude.
So
I know both of us have had. And I want to say, if you're watching, please hang with. I think the most important part of this conversation is still yet to come.
Yeah.
When we get into a little bit here, so please keep hanging out with us. But I'd say this: I know we both have done our share of street evangelism and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And seen people, you know, and that you're going back into like Jesus Explosion evangelism, and you know, but people get saved and pray the prayer and all that stuff. And same thing, man. Like I've just been in those circles so many moments where I'm there praying with a young guy, and he's trying to talk to God, but he doesn't have the right language. You know what I mean? So he's just being himself.
Totally.
And it's like, God, that seems like that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think another pushback I would have of like why not to cuss or whatever. Although people are going to email us because it seems like we gave an apologetic for cussing a little bit in this. But I do think the words we use and how we use them, it can be a bad witness, and a bad witness for Christ in multiple ways. One, I do think sometimes we as believers are irreverent with each other, and that's a bad witness to each other, to who Christ is, and to his shalom, and to his love, and all that stuff. And so I think sometimes we think, well, with other Christians, whatever, but it can be a bad witness, and that's something to think through. I think the other thing is, there are sometimes the way we use words and stuff, it is a bad witness to the world. Sometimes I think it's the opposite. They almost appreciate if they meet a Christian who cusses, but for someone that doesn't follow Jesus, I think sometimes they do want to see an otherness about us, or they do want to see a restraint in us, like a self-denial and this ability to restrain. And so I do think if we're going to push back that direction, that would be another thing I would say. And you know, that's kind of that's a tension here. It looks like Ben Slay had a question.
Yeah.
Oh, Ben brings up I think a fair point of what about replacement cuss words, changing one word for another. Yeah. It is kind of funny and silly that, you know, we'll say dag nabbit, but we won't say other things.
Yeah, oh fudge.
Yeah. And it is it feels silly. And that honestly, that's probably, as I grew up in the church, I used to be like, this seems off to me. And so, but the difference is those words do take into consideration things like context and who you're around. And those words are more.
Does this love people well?
Yeah, those words are more accepted in our society and all that. Right. So my friend Dane, growing up, not Dane Rediford on here, but a different Dane, he didn't like that he couldn't cuss growing up, so he invented cuss words. Jica was the word. He just made it up. If that's a real word, I don't know. But he just says jica. Okay. And he told me that in college. And
just says it all the time.
In my house, it's used like a cuss word.
Gosh, that's so funny.
We'll just be like, so not in bad or obscene ways, but it's just funny that everybody's using that now in my house. Let's move on a little bit. This is a common scenario. I heard this a lot, especially talking to non-Christians or whatever. Yeah. They would say, hey, you guys are about not cussing. I have a Christian friend. Uh-huh. Whenever I cuss around him, he's like, nah, stop cussing, friend, or whatever. And, or I've been a lot of times in circles where I'm the only known Christian, and they'll be like, oh, say some cuss word, and they'll be like, oh, Anthony's here, or whatever. How do you think as Christians... Sorry, I'm burping now. Yeah. We should react to that situation. What do you feel about that? Even that reputation. I don't know. Just speak to that.
Yeah. I'm not a huge. Let's say this. I'd never do it myself.
Yeah.
I think the basic
you would
premise.
Never be like, hey, stop cussing. The Lord is watching, or whatever.
Yeah, and because I just never. And this is just a premise for all of Christianity. And I think for us Christians, we just don't hold. We don't hold non-Christians to that same moral standard that we have. Now, there's obviously a moral standard.
There's instances of seeking justice where we'll seek justice for the oppressed, especially, it seems like. But other aspects of Christianity and morality, it seems like Paul flat out says, no, this is for in-house, not out of the house.
Yeah, I mean, so every verse that we just opened up, and including James, this is written to the church. Yeah. I mean, these books of the Bible were not written to the world for them to read. Now, they were written to the church that they would live in a certain way, and that they would love in a certain way, and embody Jesus in a certain way. So I think it doesn't make me cringe. I get it, and I don't even want to judge someone that if that really does offend you, because again, I think there are cultural realities to that too. That I'm Vietnamese, and so there's Vietnamese terms. that were never to be used by my mom and her siblings around her parents.
Yeah.
And just that honor shame type of dynamic that was so significant for that culture, that if they said that, it was like shame brought to the whole family, right? So you just didn't do it. And some of that trickled down into the way I was raised as well. And so there are realities, I think, that if that is who you are, you know what I mean? Like, it's not wrong for you to not like it, you know? But I would still kind of call you as a Christian to realize it wouldn't be wrong for someone to say, hey, I would say it this way. Don't tell someone not to do that. Yeah. If it offends you, just ask. Like, go the harder route and say, like, hey, this is why it offends me, and this is, you know what I mean. And have to do the task of being relationally engaged with someone, and then say, could you not? If that's all right.
Probably get to the root of why it offends you too. Is probably a worthy
exactly. And then all of a sudden now you're having a dialogue and getting to know someone. You know what I mean. So I'd say that in the midst of it, the other end of that is, because you kind of brought up that sometimes non-Christians, the guard comes down a little bit because, this Christian cusses, so he's cool or something like that. I mean, that is such an interesting social experiment for to witness, because I've heard that story so much from different people. Like, he seems a bit more normal, which is great. We want that. But I think the reality is, I think there's a lot of times I've seen and have been in circles where, like, Christians who would never say a cuss word, then all of a sudden get into the non-Christian context and try and drop anything. And you're like, dude, that's the weirdest thing that you've ever done. Like, don't do that. I do think that, like, dishonors God. Like, we don't change us. We are fully ourselves in the midst of it. And so I think that's confusing. And so that's a fine, funny line to walk.
No, totally. I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of times our work as Christians is to imitate God, and God, what I've realized from Psalm 23 and other Psalms, he's a gracious host, and he's a host into his kingdom. Yeah. And he's going to be a host at the end of all time at this wedding feast of the bride, the church, with himself. And so I think sometimes when we correct people's cussing, or that's who we are, you know, it makes them feel like, well, this person isn't very much of a gracious host. Yeah. That's not a reason to not do it, but I'm just saying that is how it's received, at least. And that's important to think through too. So.
Well, I mean, and to put this in context, and it's where we're going to head, I think, when we land this thing, but just because I think it fits here too. Yeah. Like you, we've both worked in plenty of secular contexts. Yeah. I've worked as a server in multiple restaurants, and it's a very depraved industry, right? And I agree. And I've been in so many conversations where I've seen the Christian. This is both before I was a Christian and after. That I'll even use it before I became a Christian. I had been corrected on my language, but not corrected on the way I talked about women. Right. So like, I would say things that were objectifying about an image bearer of God. Yeah. And that was okay, but don't say the S word. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think, like, there's that thing. Okay, if you're gonna call someone out in this speech that you think is morally bankrupt or reprehensible, make it consistent and call out their language where they're offensive. And I mean, I would even, like, we would probably both agree. Yeah. No, like, degrading a fellow image bearer, we would say is worse. Yeah. And so I think just the consistency for us in that is really big.
Jeff just says oof, and we probably agree. There's a little delay for us. We're never sure what quite sometimes. Fun story before we get into it. I've told you this before, but as a teacher, when I was a teacher, you always run into kids cussing, and it's like, what do you do? Like, different schools do different things. Right. How do we punish them? How do we do this? And for a lot of teens, especially in the schools I was working at, or not teens, but they were mostly junior high and elementary, it's very arbitrary. They don't get it. It feels like forbidden fruit. And again, a lot of them were not Christians too, but like how I would steward that, like have them steward it actually, is I would just say, hey, listen, if I heard them cuss, I'd pull them aside and I would just say, listen, I should never hear you cuss. Yeah. No one older than you should hear you cuss. No one in authority should hear you cuss. Right. No one younger than you should hear you cuss. So just do your best
Yeah.
And honestly, with a lot of those kids who were like
That's
notorious cussers before that,
Yeah.
if you just gave them some tools with that, they'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd never hear them cuss again.
Well, and that's the thing, especially, and that's just brings up a great point. Like with kids, they didn't come up with these words;
Yeah,
they were
totally.
taught these words.
Totally.
Like this is, in many ways, this is the normal speech that surrounds
Totally.
them any given day. And so again, like when we start thinking through what words are allowed in the public sphere, like like any of those decisions are going to be made by power, right? Like power gets to decide what gets to be the acceptable vernacular of a culture.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll tell you what.
A little bit literally
the poor
with like TV and stuff and movies.
Yes, big time, right?
The FCC.
And
is it the FCC that determines that? I don't know.
Federal FCA, not FCA.
I don't know. It's some of one
Federation
of
of
these
Christian
things.
Athletes. Is that
Well, good.
but you know what I mean. So if the poor and the marginalized have not been the ones deciding those power dynamics or deciding those answers, right?
Yeah.
At the macro level.
Yeah, totally.
And so when you have these kids, and it does happen oftentimes, you teaching in poor communities and us moving in this language and this vernacular, it's like, it's not going to fit because it wasn't shaped for for them,
Like trying to fight against something that's like part of their vernacular.
Their reality, and so I
yeah.
think like just the power dynamic
They don't
plays a
know
role in
anything
this
different.
too.
Yeah, totally.
So, and we need to see that, we need to acknowledge that, and then as Christians move into that with grace and mercy and understanding.
And that even with language, that crosses all. It's not just the vulnerable. It because of how language is, it then crosses. It's almost household by household at that point too. I think it's just important to know, because I think there's plenty of upper middle class or upper class or whatever you want to call it, that same kinds of things because of the places they were a part of. So well, anyways, thanks for bearing with me with my old teaching anecdote. I always like to it's like a way to debrief from teaching. But one kind of last area we'll talk about here is cussing. I don't think it's as a big conversation in Christian circles anymore. So maybe this is silly. Maybe I'm speaking to some of my baggage growing up, but it seems like sometimes cussing is more like. Don't cuss is more important to the Christian than other ways we use our language.
Speech,
and speech throughout that the Bible says, hey, these things are probably more destructive and than cussing is. And so, what are some of the things that, when it comes to our language, that you think we gloss over sometimes? Maybe because we think cussing are the magic curse words that bring on like damnation or whatever. We get distracted by those things and we totally forget and we allow other very destructive ways of using language in our life. We go back and forth a little bit, but
a big one, and we've talked about this a lot, is gossip and slander. And gossip is just, it's a sneaky little wench, So
I'm offended by your words. What the use of wench?
But it is. It's just this. It is crept.
I can't be a sneaky little knight, okay, man?
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Sneaky little knight with a K. I see what you did. It just. It's so prevalent.
Yeah.
It's so prevalent amongst. I think society at large.
Yeah.
But the Bible's clear, like it should have no place in the church.
Totally.
There shouldn't be a crowd here whispering about something here.
Yeah.
Outside, like the one context where we think that's okay. We've talked about this is okay if there's you and I, like you hear something and you come to me, how do we go love this brother?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And it's true.
That's a real heart issue.
Your heart.
Truly your heart, right?
Yeah.
But that's just not often the case.
And even then, you need wisdom about who you're going to share that with.
Big time.
That's real. Absolutely. If you're going to try to bring up a scenario with someone in order to love them better, only share it with people that are going to give you wisdom and advice about that.
Right.
And are going to be able to not judge and slander that person as well. It takes wisdom in that.
Right.
So
so I think that gossip piece, I think that one's massive. So again, if we're getting bent out of shape, and again, I'm not even saying you shouldn't, but if we are going to get bent out of shape about the use of a profane word, but then we're gossiping over here, I think we're missing the heart of Christ.
I think a thing we miss a lot is just again how James talks about our tongues and how destructive our tongues are. I think a lot of people live in families and they might not ever say a cuss word their entire life, but they are destroying their family with their tongue. Absolutely. Because they're saying hateful words, they're saying degrading words, they're whatever it is. And so I think a lot of times we just allow that stuff. Even like passive aggressive stuff is pretty destructive sometimes. The sarcasm, whatever. I'm speaking from my wife's experience of me. So, there's like some of that for me too is like a little bit cultural, to be like, it's what I was taught or what I learned was to, when somebody says something that you think is dumb, make sure it's known in a funny way to you, and at the end of the day, like, especially like I can make those jokes with you, so and it's fine.
Right.
Unless maybe we need to talk about
I'd start
that.
crying.
It's not fine.
You can't say it.
It's not fine. But they're like, especially in my family, like I need to reverse that stuff, and I need to not do it at all. And so I think just that the idea that our words have power and destroy is something we need to think about, because I've heard it said a lot of times. If I say something to you, how you feel about that, that's on you. And I don't think that's nuanced enough of what the word says. I think the word says it is destructive. Now, sometimes it is on me. That there are plenty of scenarios where that's true. A lot of scenarios where that's true. And even in this conversation, we've said that basically. But I think too often that's our default, and not, well, man, maybe my words were destructive. Maybe they were like a burning fire, burning up my relationships and the love in my family or wherever it might be.
I'd add in there, especially when you start getting to like, hey, so with cuss words, you shouldn't say those. That's kind of the term. Some other things that are going to fit in that category, dismissive language. I think is something we don't often think of as being something that I think does grieve the heart of God. So whether it be Verity and I, my wife and I, and she comes to me with an issue, and the language is that I craft a response that is, it's the yes, but it's all the bad communication stuff, and it's just very dismissive, and we see it with injustice issues all the time. It's like, hey, this gets brought up, and it's okay, but and all this stuff, and so I think because the tongue is such a gift from the Lord to be a mouthpiece for God, the Lord dismisses nothing. He acknowledges the reality of the human condition, so much so that he came here to live, experience, and die for it. And so in the midst of that, I think there's this dismissive aspect that we tend to like, it's not a problem. I'm saying, no, I think it's worse. You know what I mean? I think it doesn't see the other very well in the midst of that. So I think that's another one.
It's more destructive for sure. I mean, another one is, this is a common one, is taking the Lord's name in vain. How I was taught that growing up is, don't say like, oh my God. I'm just repeating God. But as we've studied that command, it's probably more than that. It is at least that. I think.
That's in view.
We certainly shouldn't use God's name as a cuss word. I think that's true.
It's really just any way you're using His name is like, not you are the holy like creator of the world. I will employ your name for my benefit, type of thing.
And I know Pastor Jim at Tempe, he's often talked about how, man, that also meant like, don't live saying like this is what the Lord is about and this is who He is, when that's not what He's about and that's not who He is. And don't make these kind of grand claims
like
about
bearing
the Lord.
False witness about God.
Essentially. And so, and that's like taking the Lord's name in vain at times too. And I think we do that sometimes. I think we're quick to say, this is how God views this, or this is how God would talk about this, or God thinks this about you or whatever. And I don't think there's enough reverence and humility sometimes when we're in that place. And so I'm still studying kind of that idea in general, but I think we gotta be careful, especially because that begins to affect other people, and it begins to warp people's view of who God is.
Yeah, big time.
When you take the Lord's name in vain in that way.
Yep.
And then even if it is just like a cuss, it warps people's view to say like, well, he's really imaginary to these people.
Yeah.
Because they don't mind using his name as
Yeah.
So. Other destructive uses of language.
Lying and deceit. We brought that false witness. Just any type of lying.
Yeah.
It's a way you use your words to, again, deceive the other.
Yeah.
And let me say this, just so we can get to the end, and also if you are, everyone knows, it's well documented. If you're at Redemption Church, I rage hard on the road. I don't.
On the what?
The road.
The road.
Road rage.
You have road rage.
I have road rage. Yeah. If a guy cuts me off and I start cussing him out, right? No, that's sin. Let me.
Do you do that?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't.
I was like, dang.
But I'm saying but in my heart, if I'm honest, I want to be I want to express my anger in these ways. No, that's not okay. And it's not just. But let's be very clear. If I. And I won't say it's difficult to toe this line. Can we say this word? But we won't in a podcast because we don't know who's watching. But if I say you F and A H, right?
Okay.
Sorry, you know what I mean? If I were to say that,
Yeah.
that's obviously bad, and I think all the alarms would go off for everyone. But if the guy cuts me off and I call him a stupid jerk, that's also not okay. You know what I mean? I am degrading another image bearer because of an inconvenience. Right? In no way is that me trying to love that person that did that. It's me trying to claim my authority and my supremacy and how dare you offend me.
Yeah.
So in other words, profane language is a big deal. The words we use are weighty.
Yeah.
But again, it's not just because it's a word that in this social setting has been told it's bad. Is this the heart of Jesus? Yeah. And that being said, because classic pushback against that is Jesus going up to the Pharisees at his baptism and calling them a brood of vipers, which is also pretty intense insult in that moment, And I think and just to speak to that, there's significant difference between someone cutting you off, someone you'll never talk to, versus sitting across from someone and calling someone out for their deceit, pain, and slander and hurt of another human being, which is what was going on in that context. And so I think let's be very clear and careful in our answer here.
Yeah, and so even why we just wanted to have this conversation is it comes up, in Christian circles, and I think that it's good to talk about. I think it's a more nuanced thing, and I think for some of us, we put way too much weight on this thing of cussing, almost it's we just put too much weight on it. We get legalistic with it, I think. But then for a lot of us, we go the opposite direction. It's just licentiousness. It's whatever. It's what even is culture? What even is context?
Totally.
And so what we're saying is, our words really matter. Take those first set of commands we read at the beginning seriously, but know that there's more nuance to it.
Yeah.
And that's okay that there's nuance, and we can navigate that because we have the Spirit, and we have the Word that we can look at and see how those words are used and what context are used. So especially if you just joined us here at the end or near the end, and you're like, man, I'm confused by what they're saying. It might be good to go back and listen to the whole thing so you get the whole context.
Yeah, steward the gift of language well.
Yeah.
It was God chose to create humanity and chose to give us language and communication that no other at that level, right? I know dolphins can kind of squawk and they can, but at no other level, right? Do people?
Sure.
But no, there's sounds too, right? At no other level. What a gift that's been given to us for us to communicate with one another, and so steward that well. All the encouragements, use this to decry injustice. If we don't do that, we're not using speech well. You're not stewarding it well. So I think that it is that issue, and it's very much in the reality of us always wanting the church to be the faithful embodiment of Jesus here on earth. Steward well the gift of speech. So.
Yeah, I agree. Cool, guys. Well, so send your emails to Vince Garvey at redemptionaz.com. No, I think
Just tenor.
those listening and those watching can appreciate that this is a bit of a nuanced conversation, and so it was fun having it with you guys, and we love you all.